USA. So great to have you here. I'm Nat, and you're watching Compassionate Connection. We're on 4M TV USA, which is a TV initiative from North America focused on mental health. 4M stands for Mental Health, Migration, Multi-Language, Culture, and Mindfulness. We are practicing mindfulness beyond borders. You're watching Compassionate Connection. Today's topic is recovery from perfectionism. And my guest today is Rachelle LaNae, who is a musician and a life coach. And we're going to talk about perfectionism, which is something Rachelle has a lot of experience with. So, first of all, I will welcome. Hello. Great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, can you explain what perfectionism is and how it can get in the way of your mental health and your relationships?
Sure, it's such a big topic, so it's hard to just put into a nice little box like a perfectionist would like to do, like myself. But perfectionism feels like kind of it's rooted in shame,
Mhm.
and it feels like wanting to, um, well, like it sounds like be perfect all the time, do things. Um, Kind of always the right way, assuming that there is a right way to do everything, and it can end up looking like being a people pleaser as well, trying to make everybody around you happy and like you, um, and so for me, I've struggled with it a lot, and I still consider myself a recovering perfectionist. So, I think that it gets in the way of your mental health because and actually, it's interesting because I've interviewed people on perfectionism, and some researchers are hoping to try to get it into the DSM-5,
Oh,
um,
wow.
so that they can actually classify it as, something that can be diagnosed,
Mhm.
because it can lead to some really negative effects. It's closely correlated with anxiety, depression, and even sometimes suicide or
Mhm.
suicidal ideation, and it's on the rise. So I think it's really important that we're aware of it because it is directly tied to our mental health.
Yeah. So, how did you know that you were experiencing perfectionism? Do you remember a moment that you can pinpoint?
I do. I was in college. I think I was a junior or senior, and I don't remember what it was that I'd been reading. I think it perhaps was Brené Brown's book about perfectionism. I can't, the title is escaping me right now, but
Is that
thank
the
you.
"I thought it was just me, but it isn't"?
That is her first book.
Oh,
I
okay.
think it's one after that. There's a heart on the cover.
Okay. All
I'll
right.
find
We'll
it and I'll let you
we'll
know.
put it in the notes. Yeah.
Yes, but, I had been reading about perfectionism, and I was in class one day, and I just realized how I was only taking classes that I could ace. I was
Mhm.
only exposing myself to things that I knew that I would have success in, and I was keeping myself from doing anything that I might fail at. So, specifically, I remember that making the connection because I signed up for an Argentine tango class, and I was super excited for it. I love to take different styles of dance classes, but this was
Mhm.
a new one for me.
Yeah.
And during the first class, I felt like a fool. I didn't know what I was doing. I had never danced with
Mhm.
a partner before. And I did not like the whole trust thing where you have to like let go and follow.
Yeah.
And I was like laughing the whole time. My partner was like, "Why are you laughing?" I was like, I don't know.
Oh my god.
And after one disaster of a class, or what I considered a disaster, it was probably normal for a beginner, I dropped the class immediately. I was like, I'm not doing that again. I was terrible at it. So that
Wow.
kinda all came together for me to realize, "Oh, I'm not actually doing things that I feel like I might fail at," you know? And,
Mm.
it just made me realize I was keeping myself in a box, which I didn't wanna be in.
Yeah, so you were actually holding yourself back from doing something that you could have really enjoyed because of that experience of feeling like a fool, and that was so scary for you.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would love to hear about what the recovery process has been like for you, because obviously it's been a while, a number of years since you pinpointed that and started working with it. So, yeah, tell us about all of that.
So, I would say that I immediately dove in deep, and I became a perfectionist about recovering from my perfectionism, which is ironic, I know. Um, but I I think really it's been about 6 or 7 years now, and I think it's been small steps. It's been really small steps. And at first, I tried to go in super hard. Like, for instance, in my relationships, I didn't want to be with someone if I didn't think it was gonna work out. So my relationships didn't last. And
Mm,
I
mhm.
saw a counselor, I was like, I wanna be able to, like, make a relationship work, and I ended up getting into an incredibly toxic relationship that was abusive, but I was, like, ignoring the red flags because I was like, "I'm trying to, like, open up and be more vulnerable," which is something that also perfectionists can struggle with,
Yeah.
and that did not go well. I got out of that relationship, thank goodness, and I mean, it's interesting to kind of bring I haven't really thought of it in the relationship aspect, but I think it can show up there too.
Mhm.
Um, but with a lot of things in my life, I feel like I have just been like, "All right, let's take this one step at a time." So, one of the things that I started doing, since I was a tiny kid, I always wanted to figure skate, and, coming from a big family, we didn't really have money for that. So, I signed up for a skating class, in college, and that was my senior year. And, um, it was hard, it was really hard, and I stuck with it, and I had the best time, and now I've been skating for, like, 6 years. On and off, I've taken little breaks, but, I sometimes get on the ice and there's little kids skating circles around me, and I'm falling and whatever, and that has been a really big tool for me in my perfectionism because I can actually recognize, like, I'm physically falling down. They say, like, get used to falling down because one of the biggest things is, like, you're afraid to make a fool out of yourself. You're afraid,
Mhm.
for people to see you as less than or that you don't have it all together, and so I have had to just go out on the ice and be like, "I don't know what I'm doing. I'm an adult beginner." And
Mhm.
now, getting to see myself over the years that I've stuck with it, it's really cool, like and that's just one area of my life, but the biggest thing I think is just having a growth mindset. So I've been
Mhm.
trying to cultivate a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, um, which for those of you who don't know, fixed mindset tends to be like, a mindset where, like, you believe something about yourself, whether it's good or negative, maybe like, "I'm good at math," or "I'm bad at running," whatever it is, you believe,
Mhm.
like, "That's just how it is, it's never gonna change."
Yeah.
And so a growth mindset has been huge for me in cultivating this idea that I can be imperfect, I can try some things and mess it up, but that's okay because I'm learning. So I just try to treat myself like a kid, like in, mindfulness and meditation, they talk about a beginner's mind. And so, having a beginner's mind in life, it's just like going back again and being like, "Well, how did I deal with this when I was like my first time learning to tie my shoes or
Yeah.
my first time doing really anything, even learning to walk," which I don't remember that, but
Right, because
I mean
perfectionism is something we learn and we take on at a certain point in our lives. So, when you were 9 months old, you probably hadn't learned it yet. But by the time you have memories, uh, a lot of those would be attached to, okay, I need to get this right
Mhm.
if it's something that starts early.
Yeah.
I'm guessing too that compassion and self compassion is a part of how you've been able to hold yourself when you're in that discomfort of trying something new and really sitting with it and like, I'm okay. This is okay. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, self-compassion has been huge. I realized for many years that I had compassion for other people, but I was not offering that same compassion to myself. So
Mhm.
I teach music and I am pretty patient with students and I'm like, it's okay to mess up. This
Mhm.
is this room, this lesson room is just a science lab where we're experimenting and trying things. And I realized like I am not doing that for myself. And
Mhm.
so I tried to extend that same compassion. And I think that some meditation practice has helped with that. There's some meditation practices that are specifically geared towards compassion and self compassion, um, and kind of recognizing that it all comes from the same place. When you
Yeah.
can cultivate compassion for others, you can also cultivate compassion for yourself. And so making that, and it's not like I'm just like all zened out over here all day, like, oh, now I'm becoming enlightened. Like it's really more in the trial and error of every day and seeing
Mhm.
how I've gotten on stage sometimes to perform and then like, wow, that really didn't go so well. But it's important for me to have those experiences where things don't go well and my friends are still there for me, my family's still there for me, all my loved ones are still there to support me. And I recognize like, oh, hey, if they can support me through this, like I can support myself too. Um,
Yeah, I love
yeah,
that. So you said that you noticed early on that in relationships you were really trying to be perfect there and only show up in relationships that you thought were going to last and that you thought were going to go well. Could you share how you've grown through that process and like maybe ways that you show up in relationships now that have been a part of your recovery?
yeah. And I think this is so important. It might be the most important area of perfectionism for me because the thing that perfectionism does is it isolates. Because it is
Mhm.
shame based, it tends to isolate us because shame isolates us. We think, I'm not good enough for a connection. And
Mm,
that
mhm.
is really a self fulfilling prophecy. We keep ourselves from connection
Yeah.
and then we prove to ourselves, like, well, I don't have any connection. So clearly I'm not worthy of it, you know? And it becomes this
Right.
dangerous cycle. And that's why it can lead to so many mental health issues because humans are wired for connection. We need it.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important to view it not only through romantic relationship lens, but also through all kinds of connections that we can have. I've even had anxiety around showing up for friends. You know, if I'm like, oh, I don't like have makeup on today, and I'm all disheveled, and
Mhm.
I'm just like an emotional wreck, like whatever it is that I feel like I'm going through, and that I'm like, I don't want to put someone else through that, you know, and
Yeah.
I don't they don't need to see me like this. I don't need to be their problem. They probably have all their stuff together. And so I'm not gonna put that on them. And then when I decide to show up and take that step in vulnerability, in knowing that I'm showing up with my imperfect, not put together self,
Mhm.
oftentimes my friends meet me there. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you're also not fully put together. And it that has been important. But with when it comes to romantic relationships, if is that kind of what you're referring to with romantic
That's
relationships?
what I was thinking of specifically, but I love that you connected it with other relationships. I was also thinking as you were sharing about even in therapy, like there have been
Mm.
times when I'm like, "Oh, I want to impress my therapist and I want to be good at this and I want to do it right." So, I was just thinking about
Absolutely.
how that barrier can come up even in the places where we're specifically trying to cultivate vulnerability.
Yeah. And I think that's actually one reason online therapy has been great because it offers that level of like you're distancing yourself. So
Mhm.
for me, sometimes I have anxiety around like showing up in person and like I don't want to cry in front of people and fall apart and whatever. And so like it's kind of nice if there's that barrier because at least I can be like, well, at least I'm just crying in my room, not in your room. Um, but with relationships, I think that what was the question originally? It was like, how have I grown in that?
Yeah, anything you want to share around that. Since you
Yeah.
gave a particular picture of like where you started, and I would love to hear like how it's going for you
Mhm.
now, maybe something specific that helps you to be more present and to be more seen.
Well, one of the things that I've recognized is that there is no perfect relationship. I am always working on how I relate with others, and I like to learn research about it. The John Gottman Institute, or sorry, the Gottman Institute, John and Julie Gottman run it. They're a great resource for relationship science. However, they mostly focus on monogamous relationships. And so I've grown a lot, I think, through learning about polyamory. And now I'm involved in a polyamorous relationship.
Mhm.
And I think that a big thing that I struggled with in the past was I need this person to commit to me and commit to me fully, and I need to know that they're going to be with me forever.
Oh,
Because
wow.
I was so deeply
Yeah.
rooted in shame, I I was so insecure, and I felt so lucky that anybody might love me, because
Mhm. Mhm.
right, being deeply rooted in shame, as perfectionism is, you feel like I am flawed. I am inherently flawed,
Right.
and that can get you into some really brutal relationships. Like, I just recognized that one of my longest relationships was emotionally abusive, and I didn't recognize it at the time. I accepted what I thought I was worthy of. Um, and so I actually really think that my quality of relationships has improved as I know that I am a free agent to go out into the world and experience relationship how I want to experience it. So I'm not just going to accept the first person who comes along who says that they care about me anymore,
Mhm.
because I recognize, a lot of people can love me and I can
Yeah.
learn to love a lot of people. And so I feel more rooted in myself and more rooted in confidence. I still struggle, of course, with insecurity like anybody. Um, but I think that I don't feel like I need to be jealous, when my partner is with another partner. Um,
Mhm.
and I just feel like I'm pretty lovable. And that's a
Yeah.
really huge step for me. And like I said, it's been 6, 7 years
Mhm.
long process to just get here.
Right. So literally just allowing yourself to be lovable, showing yourself compassion,
Mhm.
beginning to bring in some vulnerability, opening yourself up and experimenting, trying new things, going out there, being willing to feel like a fool, maybe in smaller doses to begin with. And I imagine you could take a bigger dose of it now. Like, and also, I loved your point that you originally approached your recovery from perfectionism trying to do it perfectly and like had to recognize that that wasn't the solution. Um, and yeah, I think when you have that belief that you're somehow deeply flawed, then it can become this endless struggle to just try to fix everything about yourself. So I love that self acceptance and self compassion have been such a big part of your journey. I think that we can all learn from that. It's such a an important foundation of healthy, emotional stability and all of that. Um, but yeah, so thank you so much. It's really great to hear about your journey. I love hearing new things about what that's been like for you. And I hope that a lot of our listeners will resonate and let us know if they've struggled with perfectionism, if there have been things that have been helpful and we can begin that conversation because it's important for us to talk about it when we're struggling with this. We're not alone in it. There's so many other people out there. And I know that's been a big part of your journey as well, is connecting with other people who struggle with perfectionism and being able to connect over it and to see that, there is a community, there is hope, there is support.
Mhm. And I should say the biggest, switch to kind of flip is something, because perfectionism is shame-based, I feel like I can't say shame enough. But that recognition, Brené Brown's research on shame is really helpful because she
Absolutely.
talks about how guilt is I did something wrong, and shame is I am something wrong, like,
Hmm.
and so when I am dealing with something, like, as simple as I recently, like, went to a trampoline park on a date, like, and like, fell off of something, like, into a ball pit, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
there's something, I I'm terrible at this," and I was like, "No, I just messed it up," and so changing the language of, I made this mistake rather than like,
Yeah,
well, there must be something wrong with me. I think that's really
exactly.
helpful.
Great. So, this show is Compassionate Connection. And every week, we're going to be digging into these kinds of topics around mental health, vulnerability, shame, recovery, and creating more depth and vitality in our relationships and our connections and in our lives. So, we'll be back next week. Again, we're on for MTV USA. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to our guest, Rachelle LaNae. It was so great to have you here. And I hope that you have a beautiful day.
Thanks.